This is 5-Minute Power Platform, and today we're using Desktop UI Flows, a relatively new feature that was announced just this week at Ignite. Now before I get started, I got some feedback that it's a good idea to have your face in your video, so I'm going to give this a shot with this video, but then there comes the question of how do you position it. Like there's this one which seems like too much, and then there's this one which seems like not a lot of really what we should be focusing on, so I guess we'll go with the usual bottom corner layout and we'll see how that plays out. Desktop UI Flows are a form of robotic process automation. And this is the act of getting a computer to use a computer like a human would, but automate that process. Now, if you've been using computers long enough, this probably sounds a lot like recording a macro because we're actually going to record ourselves using Paint.net and play that back. But you can't say macro anymore because if you do, someone's going to walk by and say, okay, boomer. So from here on out, we're calling this robotic process automation. And you can see how this would play out in the overall Flow story because as part of Process Automate, Flow and Desktop UI Flows, or UI Flows in general, have been brought together under one umbrella. And so you can see how we might be able to make a list where we type in a caption for a photo in SharePoint and then use desktop software like Paint.net or Photoshop or something like that to apply that caption and then save it out and then use Flow to put it in OneDrive. So you have a cloud-based process on either end, but something desktop-based that would be really hard to replicate otherwise in the middle, and the whole thing automated from end to end. And that's pretty similar to what we're going to do today. We're going to take this photo of Satya on the keynote stage at Ignite, and we're going to apply a caption to it using Paint.net, some desktop software. And we're going to do that by recording actions and then playing them back, parameterizing the caption that comes in. All right, so we'll start here at My Flows. I'm going to click on UI Flows, which are marked Preview. Make no mistake about it, they are Preview. And then I'll click New here once it comes up. Now you get the choice of a desktop app or a web app to record. I'm going to record a desktop app. Both of them require the Flow extension to be installed, and I'll show how to do that at the end. So when I click Desktop app, I click Next. I'll give it a name. I'll call this Paint.net 4. This is the 4th one I've recorded, like the 50th I've done. And then we get to this screen where we can set up input fields. So the input we're going to send into this is a caption. This is going to be a caption we're going to add to the photo, and I'll just put test caption as the value. The description is required. So I'll put enter your caption, and then we'll hit Next here. And then we get to the point where we can start recording, and so we'll click Launch Recorder. So while the recorder comes up, let's move over to the other screen here. So there's the record toolbar. I'm going to open up Paint.net as well. I'm going to open it up before I start recording. And everything I'm typing is shown in the bottom right-hand corner too. I'm going to use a lot of shortcut keys, and that allows you to see them on the video as well. So I'm going to hit record, and the very first thing I'm going to do after hitting that is click on the title bar Paint.net, so it knows which application is the one in focus. Control-O brings open the Open dialog. I'm not going to click on the file there. I'm going to type in the file name. If I click on it, it'll always be the image in that position. That's not what I want. So now I'll always get satya.jpg. I'll hit T, brings up the test control, and then here in the toolbar, I'm going to highlight the font size and type in 50. Now I could click the position of the text here and then use input above to enter the caption, but I found that wasn't 100% reliable on playback. And so instead what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click in here, type test caption, and we'll replace that text in the flow. Control-Shift-S will then do a save as, and we'll call this new file.jpg, another thing I'll replace in the flow. Enter to save, enter to get past the second dialog, and now we're good to go. I'm not going to close the application, I'm just going to hit done, and then we'll come back to our flow and we'll review it. So let's inspect the flow that we just recorded, and I've sped this up a little bit because it's a little bit tedious, but what I'm doing is I'm renaming each action. It's a good practice with Flow anyways. I found it was especially useful with UI Flows. Because what will happen is you'll run it through, it'll say, hey, I failed on send keys 1, and that doesn't do you a lot of good. But if it says, hey, I failed on file open dialog, now you've got something you can go on. And so renaming those is a really easy thing to do. The other thing I found was it makes sense to inspect every send keys action that is recorded. Sometimes the Alt or the Control keys or a quickly following Enter key would be missed. They're easy to fix and easy to kind of read through and intuit. So next we're going to go up here and we'll see here, and this one, after we rename this one, we're going to then see the test caption is below, including all the backspaces I entered as I fat fingered it. We're going to replace the entire caption there, so delete that. And we see in the dynamic content pane the caption that we would normally have in Flow. So click that, and that'll take the caption parameter and set that to be the caption in the image. Same down here, we see as we set the file name, at the very end of all those Control-Shift keys, there at the top there it says New File. I'm going to replace new file with an expression. So I'm going to go into the expression pane and use GUID, and that way I'll always have a unique file name, randomly generated file name when it gets saved. And so it's nice that you can use the dynamic content and the expressions just like you would in any other flow. It actually gives us a lot of power. So then we got the two save as dialogues that we hit enter past. We're going to name both of those. And then the last step we'll do to finish this off before we test it is to add in a close application action. I found those worked kind of flaky right now, not always, but I think it's a good practice to add that in. So now let's try this out. So now as the final step, we're ready to test it. And so it's asking us for our caption. That's the caption that the UI flow is going to place on that image. And so we have to think to ourselves, what would Satya say as he's sitting on the keynote stage looking out over the audience? He's probably saying, hey, where's Phil? Phil wasn't at Ignite this year. So we're going to use that as our caption for Satya to say. And so I'll click Test Now. And then it's going to start running the UI flow. And so everything here is going to be the UI flow executing. You can see the keys on the bottom right again. So I'm just going to stand here and watch it. And I found that after it opens the application, it tends to wait about 10 seconds. So we'll sit here, fingers crossed, and hope this all runs. So let's see here. We should get the Control O in a second. After it's going to do the title bar. We should get Control O as it opens up the file. There we go. Typed in satya.jpg. Open. There's our image. Should switch to the text control. There it is. Set the font. And then it's going to place the type control next to Satya. And it should take the parameter we just set. Hey, where's Phil? There it is. Now it's going to do save as. Put in a GUID file name. And save it out. So it worked. Second file save as dialog. It's not going to close the application. I found that didn't always work. But we did complete the UI flow. And so everything we recorded now test and we can automate as part of a flow. So let me share some of the tips and tricks I gathered after doing this over and over again. The first one is to always start by getting the window focused. So click record and then click on the title bar of the application you're working on so UI flow knows which application it's focusing on. Otherwise it would sometimes get confused and you get a new record block for each application it touches and it can really kind of screw up the flow. Second thing is close all background windows. You notice I had a clean desktop. Otherwise, weird things would happen, like another window would try to pop on top of like the open dialog and some strange things, and they'd all get recorded, of course. Know your keystrokes. I found between going File Open or doing Control O, the keystrokes were always a lot more reliable, and they're easier to edit because you can really interpret them better than you can the screen positions. And so I thought that was the best way to go. And then, of course, following on that, to always inspect your send keys actions. I found that sometimes like an Alt key or a Control key would be missed, or if I hit Enter too fast, it would be missed. They're easy to add back in. Just make sure that you check for them. And the keys appear to follow the C# enums for keys enums, so they're easy to edit too, and I'll include that list in the description. Like all flows, the action names must be unique. It's a little harder here because there's so much redundancy in everything it's recording, so you got to be a little more creative to make sure those are unique. I also found that closing the application while recording would sometimes cause the recorder itself to close, which screwed everything up. It's easy to add a close action at the end when you're editing your flow, and even then I found that it didn't always yet work. I assume that's just a preview issue that's going to be fixed. And then finally, I recommend to learn some foreign curse words. You're going to go through the curse words you know really quickly, and so just for variety, it's nice to have some foreign ones to mix in. And really the thing that's frustrating is that the recorder watches everything you do and records it. And so you really have to be careful as you go through here and that you're doing things not necessarily the way you would normally do when you're using the software, but how you want it recorded and in the sequence and all that. And it just becomes frustrating because if you use computers a lot, you get used to your old habits and you really have to tailor those for what you're doing here. And it can be frustrating and requires some patience, and a couple good new curse words is a nice mix into it all. So installing the Chrome browser extension is pretty easy. When you go launch Recorder, it's going to prompt you to download the file. So when you click download, then you'll see it there in your downloads. You can open it and it's going to install. You can also download it directly from the Chrome store. Now, it only runs on Chrome-based browsers, so that's the Chrome-based Edge and Google Chrome, and it doesn't run on a Mac browser. When I downloaded it on my Mac, it downloaded the same Windows executable file. So once it installs, you go through the install process after accepting the terms, and you should see it come up and it's going to tell you to restart your browser. It's not joking. You really need to restart your browser. At least I found I did. So here we go. We got our success measure. Hit close, restart your browser, and you're ready to go. This has been a quick overview of the new feature, Desktop UI Flows. I hope you found it useful. Thanks for watching.